Hello, everyone. I'm Adam Fishman, the Executive Director of American Friends of Likud, and we have with us a very, very close friend for many years, almost as long as he's been in the Knesset, I believe, and that is member of Knesset Yariv Levin. Yariv is joining us from his office in the Knesset today. Just really quickly, a few brief words on Yariv before we ask him to give his briefing and we get to the Q&A. First of all, Yariv Levin is a member of the Knesset for the Likud party. He is the opposition whip. Prior to the current Knesset, he served as the Speaker of the Knesset in the 23rd Knesset. And from 2015 until being elected Knesset Speaker, Yariv served with distinction as the Minister of Tourism. He's also been the coalition chairman and has held many, many senior positions throughout his tenure in the Knesset and in his service to the government. And we thank you for joining us here with American Friends of Likud from all across the US, a couple in South Africa and the UK as well, friends among us. So I'll turn it to you to give us a quick briefing as to what's going on, or not so quick, as long as you can take, and then we will get to as many of the questions, some of which we've already received, and we'll go further with our discussion from there. Yariv?
So, hello everyone, and Adam, again, thank you very much for organizing this meeting and for your really, really long years of efforts to make this connection something that is not sporadic, but something that is continuously growing, and I think it's very important. I must tell you the truth, those aren't the best days regarding the situation in Israel, I think, from every aspect. And I would like to say that we find ourselves in a situation that the government that was formed a few months ago is, I think, for the first time, a government that is based and actually controlled by the Islamic movement faction in the Knesset, which is called Ram, that has only 4 seats out of 120, but those are 4 crucial seats, taking into account that the majority that the government enjoys is 61 to 59. And that, combined with the fact that there are also another radical left party, Meretz, that has 6 seats and is part of the coalition. The biggest party that is part of the coalition is Yesh Atid, also a left-wing party with 17 seats. Another left-wing party is the Labour Party that shifted completely to the left, has 7 seats. That creates a situation that the government, although is headed by so-called right-wing Naftali Bennett, is actually very, very left-oriented. And what is even worse is the fact that the so-called right-wing side of the government, which is much smaller, lacks any real interest in preserving and promoting right-wing's ideas in every aspect. From Prime Minister Bennett himself, who formed this government in order to fulfill his personal ambition to be Prime Minister, whatever the price is. And time after time after time, just does everything possible to satisfy those left-wingers in order to maintain the government somehow standing. To Gideon Sa'ar's faction, Tikva Hadasha, which is derived only by the will to, I don't know how to call it, to revenge what he thinks Netanyahu did to him personally, in a way that he is accepting almost everything that is done by the government or by those left-wing parties as long as that maintains the government strong in a way that Netanyahu can't come back to being prime minister. And this lack of balance is something that we already see on the ground on a lot of aspects. I won't deal with all of them, but I'll give maybe one or two examples that I think are very important. You know, for many years, we dealt a lot with the issue of Judah and Samaria, and I think we reached some kind of peak when during the negotiations that I had the honor to be part of it, during the negotiations regarding the President Trump's plan, the issue of sovereignty over Judah and Samaria was on the table. It was the official policy of the Israeli government for the first time in history, and was discussed seriously with our American partners. And I think that we were very, very close to reach an historic breakthrough regarding the ability to not only declare Israeli sovereignty, at least on parts of Judah and Samaria, but also to do that with the affirmation and recognition of the American administration. I won't get into what happened. I think it was maybe a movie, maybe a book, I don't know what, about why it failed in the end, but still, I think that even the discussions, even the things that were said, even the things that were said by President Trump and by senior officials in his administrations, all of that are some kind of progress, and I think an important one that can be a base for future change that eventually will get us closer to our goal that the whole Eretz Israel will be under Israeli and Jewish sovereignty. But while we dealt with that, we find ourselves now dealing with something completely different. Not only Israeli sovereignty on Judah and Samaria was put aside, now we are dealing with trying to preserve what is left from Israeli sovereignty over the Negev and over some parts of the Galilee in the north. Because what happens is that this Islamic faction in the Knesset, that its support is derived mainly from the Bedouin population in the Negev, put that issue on top of everything. And they demand on a weekly basis radical changes in the Negev that will enable the long process of Bedouins taking control over lands all around the Negev, and push that forward in two aspects. First of all, encouraging the process, and second, making it something that is legal and has in the end the stamp of approval by the government on the ground. And they even succeeded to pass an unbelievable law that is called the electricity law, that enables them to connect something like 100,000 buildings that were built without permission, mainly on land that is owned by the state and is not the private land, and they don't have any rights over it. It enables them to connect those houses to electricity and to water in a legal way, which means on the ground recognizing those houses as something that must receive in the end of the process permissions, and actually makes this theft of lands as something that receive Israeli government and Israeli law recognition as new houses that were built according to the law. More than that, most of those houses are sketched all around the place deliberately in order to control those lands in a way that there are tens of new, what we can call Bedouin settlements that will be in fact recognized now in a way that they will be connected to electricity, to water, will be expanded, in the end will stay there forever, even in places that there are many important main roads that are now under the danger of being occupied on both sides by those places and so on. And what happened is that because this law was passed, it sent some kind of a message to those people there that now they are the owners of the Negev. And what we see immediately is a huge increase in terror attacks on buses, on private vehicles, gangs that are taking protection from businesses, all Jewish businesses all around the Negev and so on. A complete chaos. That in the end, its bottom line is that the Israeli control on the Negev is not only in danger, we lose this control, and those Bedouins and Islamic people are getting, instead of the government, and are controlling more and more land in the important roads. All of this, as I said, is done by this government that approved this law and it passed it in the Knesset with its 61 votes, is done in the support of Gideon Sa'ar, of Ayelet Shaked, of Naftali Bennett and their people. And on the other side, they are restricting to the minimum what was done by our government, which was trying to demolish houses that were built illegally and so on. Now those activities almost stopped. A few weeks ago, we had something unbelievable, that even planting trees, something that is done in order to prevent the Bedouins to expand their illegal houses to more and more lands, even those planting of trees was stopped by the government in order not to make those four members of the Islamic Party, I don't know, angry and endanger the government. So this is one example of huge damage that is done on the ground right now as we are talking. Another example that I think is worth mentioning is what happens in Judah and Samaria. We are in a situation that since the forming of this government, the Palestinian Authority started to work completely freely on the ground, on sea area. Sea areas, as we all know, are the areas that under Israeli rule, and both regarding security and regarding the civil administration. And they are deliberately building there, again, in the same method as I described in the Negev, in order to grab more and more land and prevent us from expanding our cities and villages there. More than that, they are deliberately building in adjacent lands to already existing mainly villages, in a way that they strangle them, in a way that they won't be able to develop, and will be in the end in a situation that they will be like a bubble with a small road connecting, and they are building all across the road on both sides, and everyone understands what it means. Not in the future of decades, but in few years, sometimes in few months. All of that, again, is done without the government doing anything to stop it, in a way that changing it and demolishing what is built and so on is almost impossible. We see a very, very big and I must say awful change regarding the policies towards Iran. They are, instead of maintaining Israeli freedom of operating without any prior advice or prior notification, and doing freely what is needed in order to try to stop the Iranian nuclear project. Now they changed and shifted the policy to a declaration that Israel won't do anything without a prior notification, mainly to the American administration. It means actually that our hands are tied. It means for Iran that they are running much faster, knowing that they aren't under any risk of an action that will be done without American approval, and probably that will be quite hard to get in certain aspects. And we see the progress of negotiations with Iran, again, going on without any real Israeli ability to stop it. And all of that, again, is completely different than our policies that were based on trying to stop in every way and in complete freedom of action of the Iranian project. Last comment that I'll make as at least for this stage is that, as you understand, the coalition of 61 to 59 is very narrow, with very narrow margin, and I do believe that we have the ability to bring the one vote that will make a situation that the government doesn't have a majority in the parliament and will lead to new elections almost automatically. And we are trying to put as much pressure as we can, especially on those members of Knesset that at least see themselves as right-wingers, although, as I said, they are voting for all those awful laws, as I gave an example earlier. But I still believe that pressing them to leave the government, to say stop, enough is enough, the situation that the Israeli government is completely dependent on the Islamic movement, which is really an absurd that no one understands. I think that trying to push them to do that is something that we are working on very hard. We succeeded unprecedentedly to win many votes on bills that we stopped or bills that we promoted against the decisions of the government, because we succeeded to persuade one or two members of the coalition to vote with us, and then they lost the majority. This is important. That helps us to minimize a bit the damage, but it's not enough. I think that it's crucial that we'll put an end to that government and go to elections as soon as possible before the damages will accumulate and be harder to fix after that. So at least for now, I think this is the situation that we are living, at least as I see it.
Thank you very much. So you've actually anticipated my first question, and that is, what is the strategy for moving forward in order to take down the government and get to the next stage where the Likud and the right wing, the real right wing, or those who have not compromised themselves as the right wing, would take over. But as you said, that would be by convincing one of the right wingers that are currently in the government to jump ship in order to reduce the majority or get rid of the majority. But is that the only way? Because we've seen other options put out there, and this is what I'm going to ask you about the current head of the opposition, former Prime Minister Bibi Netanyahu. There were talks of plea deals as late as last week going into this week, talks from within Likud that of people who wanted to challenge him. I know that you have been very close and a loyalist to Bibi for a long time, and believe that he needs to lead the party. But aren't there other options and alternatives to toppling the government and bringing the Likud back into the fore? Can you address that a bit?
Look, of course, there are other alternatives. For example, I think that at least some of the members of the Islamic Party are under a very big pressure from extremists on their side that are saying that what they achieved is not enough, and that the cooperation, so-called, with an Israeli government is something that is forbidden anyway, so they have to step down in the vote against the government, or at least demand more and more things that will be hard to be accepted and create tension that can lead to the collapsing of the government. That's an example, but I must say one thing that we must know. Look, I think that former Prime Minister Netanyahu is not only a great leader, I think, in international level, not only in Israeli level. I think he has abilities, he has a vision, and he has achievements that I don't think that anyone in the current political map of Israel will be able to even reach closer to what he did, and his abilities to continue leading the state of Israel. And I think that as long as he's with full capacity and full power and will to continue doing his mission, I do believe that Israel has only what to gain from it. But apart from that, I must be sincere with you that I believe that if he would have been leaving politics, it would have left the Likud in a very, very bad situation, because two things would have happened simultaneously. The first one, a very big struggle inside the Likud for the leadership of the party, with no real candidates that I can think of that really, really can gain broad support and broad recognition as a future leader. But what is more important is the fact that I think there would be hundreds of thousands of our voters that would have been feeling, I think, betrayed. This is the right word to use, in a way that Netanyahu left them and decided to sign some kind of deal with the Attorney General and so on, in a way that my prediction is that what would have happened in such a situation is that the left parties would have run immediately to dissolve the Knesset and go to immediate elections, while hundreds of thousands of our people are very disappointed and probably won't go to vote at all, which means that with our party, with internal struggles, without a prominent leader, and hundreds of thousands of our voters so disappointed, the chance of winning those elections is very, very low. I think it's obvious. So I think both for the sake of the state of Israel, first of all, but also for the political sake of the Likud party and the right wing, it's very important that Netanyahu will continue. I don't see any chance of achieving even something close to what we have now under the leadership of any other candidate. And I must add another thing. I think that Netanyahu personally also has a very, very strong support among the Haredi public, the ultra-Orthodoxes that are a significant part of the overall Israeli population and, of course, of the current Knesset. And I think that if he steps down, there is a possibility that they will say, okay, right now, when you don't have Netanyahu, maybe all of us or some of us will join the other side for some kind of government based on things that they need. So we can find ourselves also in a situation that the overall what we call the national side of the Israeli politics that is very united now under the leadership of Netanyahu can be in a very, very dangerous situation. So I do think that there are maybe some options to really change the current government. But Netanyahu stepping down or moving out of politics is certainly not one of them. I think it will do the counter effect.
So working off of that assumption, right? The Times of Israel and other credible news sites have reported that there's been dialogue between MBS of Saudi Arabia and Netanyahu, the leader of the opposition. He's not even in the government. So a question from our president, Jerry Platt in New York, how do you read that? Does it indicate that perhaps MBS is putting his bet to one side of the table?
First of all, I don't know. I read it, but I don't know if it's true. I won't be surprised if it's true because, look, I think that former Prime Minister Netanyahu is really a unique exception regarding his the international appreciation and the way leaders all around the world see him. And I think that, what happened, for example, I think there's a huge achievement and huge change in the Middle East with the signing of the Abraham Accords, for example, which was derived, I think, from this very, very, I think, clear ways that Netanyahu led Israel all along the years, plus his personal abilities and the personal appreciation for him, and of course, plus the vision of former President Trump and the way he changed all the paradigm of seeing the situation in the region. And I think it was an unbelievable success. And of course, the courage of those Arab leaders and what is the most important thing, the common interest of everyone to build the peace relations. I think that in that aspect, all of those conditions exists also regarding our relations with Saudi Arabia. And I think that in a way, maybe it's a tragedy that what happened with the Abraham Accords didn't happen a year or two before. Because I do believe that if both President Trump and Prime Minister Netanyahu would have had, let's say, a year more, 2 years more, probably the chance of achieving something with also with Saudi Arabia was a real chance. We'll never know if something like that would have really happened, but in the end. But I think that the basis, the strong basis that the Abraham Accords are built on really exists also regarding Saudi Arabia. And I must say another thing, that doing such agreement with Saudi Arabia is not only important because the strength and the importance of Saudi Arabia as a superpower in our region, but it also would have had an immediate effect on our relations, for example, with countries like Oman, or what is even more important, I think, with the biggest Muslim country in the world in the aspect of population, which is Indonesia. I do believe that with Indonesia, the chances of doing something and creating formal diplomatic relations, if we would have something like that with Saudi Arabia, would have been achievable. What I also must add is that still, even though we didn't do something official with the Saudis, we already saw some kind of progress. I think the most, I think the most, I don't know if it's the most important one, but it's really something that is really felt and can be seen easily, is the permission that flights to Israel and from Israel of all airliners, including Israeli airliners. This permit that the Saudis gave us to fly over Saudi Arabia is a huge change regarding, not only tourism, but also trade relations with the Far East and so on, because we must understand that, for example, now to fly from Israel to India is shorter than flying from Israel to London. And this is, of course, commercially a very, very important change. It enables us to fly to the UAE in 3 hours, which is, like countries in Europe and so on, and this changes completely the map regarding trade and other things. So there is some kind of progress that was done in Saudi even before. I do believe that if we'll continue with those policies, in the end, with strong leadership, we can reach even agreements, even more peace agreements that are, as I said, crucial in many aspects.
So part of the reason that all this is happening and has happened prior to the current administration is because of shared interests, right? And you mentioned earlier about Iran, the U.S. and Israel and the Gulf states' approach toward Iran. With that in mind, I want to ask you the next question. This is coming from Steve Goldberg, one of our board members in California. And with respect, understanding, I guess, that there's been a significant change, not only here in our country, in Israel, but also a significant change in the administration in the US. The question is phrased this way: are the Israeli people prepared for the consequences of taking unilateral military action against Iran's nuclear facilities without support from the US? So I'll leave it at that and let you respond.
First of all, I think that the support of the US is crucial, like everything. But we always say to ourselves that we were during the Second World War in a situation that we needed the US and other countries to bomb the camps in Poland and Germany and so on, and no one wanted to do that. Now we have a Jewish independent state with an army and abilities that are needed first and foremost for the basic thing of protecting the mere existence of our people and our state and our country. So I think that doing it with the United States is very, very important, with huge importance. But if we have to choose between letting Iran being a nuclear superpower or to act alone, I think we don't have any other chance than to defend ourselves and the future of our Israel and our children and so on. And I do believe another thing, that once you have the abilities and once you have the decisiveness of doing things, that really improves the prospects of gaining support from the US administration or other countries. And if people see you as weak, as someone that is hesitating, is thinking, okay, I'm not strong enough, I can do it without them, I won't do it, and so on, it makes it easier for them to say no to you and to stop you. So I think that in that aspect, most Israelis understand that we don't have any choice. That's not that we are, this is the last thing we want to happen, but I think that the alternative of letting Iran continue is something we can't live with. Hopefully, in that I must say, we'll see the United States and other countries are standing with us. And in order to achieve that, first of all, the Israeli government must be very, very clear, must have a very, very strong standing and a bright policy. And unfortunately, what we had up until the forming of this government, we don't see it, at least until now.
So Ben-Gurion, I think, was very famous in saying, when speaking about the UN, he said shmum, when the UN would go against certain things that Israel had to do. Specifically, right now, the question is how, this is on a slightly different topic, but along the same lines, how damaging is the Amnesty International report calling Israel an apartheid state? This is not something new, we've heard this before, but what do you believe can be done to counter it and to make Israel's case to the world?
First of all, I must say that, shmum was said and everyone understands what Ben-Gurion meant, but I don't underestimate the importance of international community and the importance of international support, and I think we have to take it into account. We have to try and do every effort to persuade, sometimes even to take into account what is said to us and so on. That's okay. But I think that it doesn't mean that we'll sit and do nothing while our mere existence is under such a danger. And I think this is exactly the difference between trying to persuade, negotiate, which is crucial and important, trying to gain support, and between the situations that you are saying, okay, I'm tying my hands and I'm not doing what I have to do because they don't accept it and so on, which is something that I personally think is a big mistake. Now, I look, I'll say another thing that must be said. I think that one of the most important tools to try and create this international support is to gain support in the public opinion. Because if the public is with you, it has a big impact over the leaders. Especially in an issue like that is not, domestic things that everyone feels personally, but is again something that is remote, and the ability to gain support for that is very important, because once there is a demand from the public, it's very hard to the administration to go in other way. I think that in that aspect, Prime Minister Netanyahu, again, with his prominent exposure and appreciation inside the public, both in the United States and in other countries, is something that we really miss now. Is we lack this ability of persuading the people on the ground to support our cause, and in that way influence the decisions of the politicians. And I think, again, that to gain this support, you have to be very, very bright and to go in a very direct line.
So with this, I know we have limited time, only a couple minutes left, and this will be the last question. Specifically, I was wondering what your personal plans are, future in politics. What do you aspire to? And as well, I guess attended to that question is a question from Marty Olener, one of our President Club members and the head of the RZA, the Religious Zionists of America. And this is a question that's been asked many times. Should there be someone that is groomed within the Likud to take over? You've mentioned before that you don't see any of the candidates right now that could be that person, but should there be a process of grooming within the Likud?
Look, it depends. If you'll ask my wife, she'll tell you that I need to retire and move for business, but she says it for at least 13 years since I was elected first as member of Knesset, and it didn't happen up until now. But seriously, I must admit that I didn't understand some of my colleagues, whom I appreciate, of course, in many aspects, but I think they made a very, very big mistake running to to television programs and so on, and declaring themselves as candidates and so on. I think that for many reasons, and I talked about some of those reasons earlier, I think that as long as Netanyahu is willing to continue and has the drive and the ability to lead the party and hopefully to become again prime minister, it's very important that we'll stand completely behind him, and all those talkings about who will inherit him and when and so on is just doing harm to the image of the party and to the overall ability of showing that we have the belief. First of all, we must believe in our ability to come back to power, because if we won't believe in it, no one will believe we can do it, and then no one will, for example, come to us out of those 61 that support now the government. I'll tell you more than that. It's like, two ships. One is our ship and the other is a ship of the government. Now, there are many, many members of Knesset that are standing on the ship of the government and are thinking to themselves, when is the right time to jump to our ship and to change sides? And in order to make someone do that, we need two things. The first one is our ship must be stable, because no one will jump to a ship that is unstable and can be drawn. So all those talkings about Netanyahu leaving and someone coming instead of him, and this is the candidate, and this one is the candidate that speaks against the one, and so on, and the polls that predict that we lose many seats under the leadership of any of them. All of that creates a situation that on the other side, people think, okay, maybe the ship is not so stable, so it's not a good idea to jump to it, and that helps the government to stay and maintain its power. The second important thing, of course, is that we need people to believe that someone is going to jump. It's not important even if really someone is going to jump, but if people will believe that it's going to happen, then the chance of someone doing that will be, of course, higher. And we are working very hard on that, and I think we have a good success because we show, for example, in many votes in the Knesset, the government loses because people are, hesitating and are voting with us for future prospect of building some kind of bridge that they can cross to the other side. So that's done, and I think with a lot of success. But we have to show that we are united, and we are not dealing with questions of what will be in the future if something will happen, but we are dealing with only one thing, that we are united under former Prime Minister Netanyahu in order to go back to power as soon as possible. And from my point of view, this is the right thing to do. This is what is needed to be done. And that's why I can't give even to my wife a good answer to her question. What am I going to do in the future?
I want to thank you, Yariv, for joining us tonight. We appreciate all your years of devoted service in the Knesset to the state of Israel and the integrity with which you bring to the job. And we look forward to brighter days ahead. Today is Rosh Chodesh Adar Aleph. Misha Nichnas Adar Marbim B'Simcha. Those who enter into the month of Adar should increase their joy, and we are looking forward to increasing our joy very much so as we move forward. Thank you for joining us, and we look forward to seeing you next time.
Thank you very much, everyone. Thank you.